What we're going to have a look at here is arrays, more in arrays. Our objectives really are the ones below. We've got 2D arrays, multi-dimensional arrays, traversing 2D arrays, our jagged array, and introduction to array lists, some traversing array lists, and possibly array list methods. And then we should hope to get into some developing algorithms using arrays. So before we begin, let's have a look at a basic array. So on line number 17, we have a standard array. Okay, it's a string array. The name of the array is, or the reference variable is ARR, and the elements are name 1, name 2, and name 3. Index position 0 to 2. Okay, so 0, 1, and 2. And the length is 3. So if we have a look here at our for loop, we've got while I is less than the array length, keep iterating, and then print out those values. So that's all quite straightforward. So let's have a look at a 2D array. And in fact, let's see how we can convert this into a 2D array. So being a 2D array, it's going to have 2 dimensions. So rather than 1 box bracket, we have 2 box brackets. Let's just put them together. Whether they're apart or not doesn't really matter. And rather than one set of braces, we're going to have subsets of braces within the braces. Okay, so if we added another, let's copy this area here, okay, and add an outer brace to say that we're in a 2D array, okay, and then inside you're going to separate each row essentially with a comma. So I'll just copy you, another row, and so on and so forth. And just to make it a bit more visual, I'm going to put each of these on a separate line so we can have a better understanding of what this looks like, perhaps in a coordinate sense. So our 2D array very much looks like this. So let's add different names here to make it slightly more interesting. Name 4, 5, name 6. Okay, name 6. Name 7, name 8, and name 9. So you can see how quite easily we converted a 1D array into a 2D array. So now, instead of having one row, we essentially have 3 rows here, okay? So we refer to this one as row 0. Okay, let's make that 0 rather than an O. This is going to be row 1, and the final one here is just going to be row 2. Additionally to our rows, we will have columns now. So if I can just jump up the top here, and I'm going to say column 0, just put some U in a comment, and spaces here, column 1, space again, and column 2. So it's simply a game of coordinates if you think about it. You've got your row which will come first, and then you've got your column. So if we want to access our element, let's just get rid of our for loop for a moment. So if we want to access one of our elements, it would look something like this. So system out print, and let's say we want to access name 1. What we'd have to do is type our array name here, okay, and just give some space so we can see everything in better clarity. Array, box bracket, and in the first box bracket you put the row position, so that's going to be row 0, and then in the following box bracket you put the column, which is also going to be 0. Okay, and that should give us a name 1. So let's just print that and see if we get the correct result. Perfect. So therefore, if we wanted to access name 2, how would we do that? Any ideas? Okay, so we've got row 0, we're still on row 0, and we've got column 1. Okay, so we're just going to put a 1 into the second item. So the 2 box brackets, the first D, if we want to refer to it as that, represents our row, and the second D represents our column. So if we print that, we should get our name 2. Okay, so let's make it a little bit harder. How can we access name 8? Okay, you've guessed it, so row 2 this time, and column 1. And if we run that, we should get our name 8. Excellent. So essentially that is a 2D array. There's not much more than that, guys. If we have a different data type, you just substitute your data type accordingly. If it's an int data type, obviously we're going to change our values so they are numbers rather than strings. Okay. And again, we've got Boolean, etc., etc. String. Can I spell string? Okay, so that's how we access it. Now, how do we traverse it? Because that's a little bit more difficult. Now, we traverse the 1D array using this method here. But with a 2D array, we need to add a second layer. Okay, so we're going to add another for loop in the center. So here we have a nested loop. So this is a nested loop. And this will be how we accessed our second dimension. So the first element, or the first for loop, is essentially accessing your row. Okay, we can get rid of that. So our first element is accessing our row, or our first iteration, our outside loop we call it, is accessing our row. Okay, and the inner loop is accessing our column. Okay, so what would we write on this line? We can use array.length on the outside because essentially we're saying the length of the row. But how do we access the length of the column? We simply put our box bracket here, and that will determine what column we're accessing. Now, for a standard array, if they all have the same length, we can just put the row zeros here. Okay, so we could just simply put a 0 there, and that means, okay, every row has the same length, okay, so the same number of columns, so we don't need to differentiate it. If we want to be more specific, we could say access i's, so that's going to be our rows number of columns, so that's going to be more specific. All right, so essentially when we put I here, we're saying we are on this row on the first iteration. Okay, access that number of columns. Okay, I'll explain a little bit more about that after, but you could essentially put number 0 there if we have the same number of columns for each row. Okay, if they do change, as we're going to discuss shortly in a jagged array, then we would simply change this value to I, as I've just done here. Okay, so that's the inner loop, sorry. And how do we access the variables? You add your print statement like so, and what do we put here? We put our array, and it's similar to our access. What do we need to put here? Our 2 box brackets, like so, and the first value is going to be our row, okay, as we discussed earlier, and the second value is j, which is referring to our column. So if we print this out, what we'd probably also want to do is add some form of spaces in between, okay, so we can have a space in between our rows and columns. So I'm just going to add a print statement here, okay, like so, and that will give me a new line each time. All right, and I could have even put it after, perhaps that would have been, yeah, that's fine. So we'll put it here, and we'll put some spaces after each element. So just add a concatenation and an empty string here like so, and if we run that, then we will see all of our values: name 1, name 2, name 3, name 4, name 5, name 6, name 7, name 8, 9, name 9. If we wanted them beside each other, we would just remove the lin here, like so, and we would have them going across. So you've got your name 1, name 2, name 3. That name 8 is just a random one here, so I'll just get rid of that and run the code again. So we've got name 1, name 2, name 3, name 4, name 5, name 6, name 7, name 8, name 9. So what we've just covered is our 2D array, our multi-dimensional array.